Get full access to RFR only on Patreon. Become a member of the RFR Patreon community to get more Rebel Force Radio. Bonus shows and content are available right now only at patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio.
Rebel force has penetrated the shield and landed on Endor.
This is where the fun begins.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
This is Rebel Force Radio.
Your source for the Force.
Star Wars news and commentary.
With Jason Swank and Jimmy Mack.
I've seen Star Wars 500 times. Star Wars #1.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe. I suggest we use it.
Now it's time for Rebel Force Radio.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Well, the holidays are over, and the Super Bowl is over. And here we are, 317 days away from Star Wars Episode 9 hitting theaters, and no trailer, no teaser, and not even these little clips that were rumored to show up during the Super Bowl. And, based on what critics and journalists are saying about the Super Bowl, whether you look at the halftime show or you look at the game itself, the whole thing seemed to, and the commercials, let's not forget the commercials, the whole thing kind of got a big collective, to use one of my friend Jimmy Mack's favorite descriptions, I say that sarcastically, meh.
Oh, yeah.
It got a big collective meh.
Sure did.
And I'm not a football fan. I appreciate the talent, the athletic prowess that it takes, the rarity that it is to have that kind of ability to put you on that field as a professional. I'm aware, and I love excellence in all different shapes, manners, and forms. But I'm certainly not a football fan. I can't really discuss the mechanics of the game. But what was it? The lowest scoring game ever the lowest scoring Super Bowl, I think, ever.
At least it was close down to the end, but still, the drama value of that was relatively slim. And the only thing that really would have rescued the night would have been a Star Wars Episode 9 trailer, but we didn't get that. We got a Star Trek trailer. And so
yes,
Trekkies are dancing in the streets, but we did not get...
do Trekkies dance in the streets?
There's the Star Trek dance that they do.
Oh.
It's called doing the warp with Worf. Do the warp with Worf. But no, we got, as Star Wars fans, we didn't get jack. We got Harrison Ford and Saw Gerrera in a commercial together for Amazon Alexa.
That's right. I did appreciate that, the Harrison Ford commercial. In fact, many people were saying that actually was the best commercial of the whole game, of the broadcast, was the Harrison Ford. He's become such a character, this known curmudgeon. But you know what? I thought that for a minute I might have spotted a Star Wars tattoo on singer Adam Levine. And so I thought, well, maybe that's the Star Wars moment. Yeah, that was the clip that maybe they were talking about.
Are you serious?
I looked for one. I thought maybe I would see one. I mean, he's so tatted up. I mean, I'm like, he's the right age. I'm like, okay, maybe he's got a Star Wars tattoo.
Come on, you got to have a TIE fighter or something in there, Levine.
Hey, Andy Hurley, Fallout Boy, would have had a Darth Maul or something rocking on the...
Yeah, Andy's heavily tatted up, but I don't think we've ever asked him if he has any Star Wars tats. Have we ever asked him?
I don't think we have. What's
the matter with us?
But I was at lunch, and I know I occasionally I'll talk about my lunch group that I sit with, and there was some people talking about the appropriateness or lack thereof of Adam Levine showing his tatted up torso. And I had to just say, wait a minute, hold on a second. Are we really debating the appropriateness of a rock star shirtless? Like, where do we live that all of a sudden this is shocking? I mean, I grew up in the 80s and rock stars never wore shirts. I don't even think that Axl Rose owned a shirt in the 80s.
I'll tell you what, it becomes a topic of conversation because of the Janet Jackson controversy all those years ago. But who cares about that stuff? We're here to talk about Star Wars.
Yeah, right.
And
yeah,
the Super Bowl. I guess it was disappointing because we didn't get any Star Wars content in there. But as I pointed out last week, no studios are promoting films right now that are opening up in December. It just isn't happening. It doesn't happen. Everyone wants to point at The Force Awakens. Well, yeah, there was a lot of excitement about that, and they just wanted to get something out there to show that the franchise was back and that things were actually happening. But in the cases of all the other films, you saw a pretty traditional marketing push for all of them post Force Awakens, with the exception of Solo, which a lot of people might point at as being under-marketed. And I think that's a fair assessment to make about Solo. But I don't think that anyone necessarily owes us anything as far as the Super Bowl goes. Sure, we were speculating that there could be an ad in the Super Bowl, and then other nerd journalists were saying that they knew for a fact it was coming out before Christmas. This part of waiting for a new Star Wars film is really annoying to me. Is this whole angst over waiting for when the trailer's going to drop. I don't want to hear it.
Well, wait a minute, though. Isn't it really, in fairness, just a way to kill time? To count down to the movie, to give us something to talk about and something to do, because otherwise you're just sitting here in a vacuum waiting for the days to tick by. I think it's a way to preoccupy ourselves.
It is, but then again, like I said, you run the risk of showing people material that might end up on the cutting room floor, and that's really frustrating. I'd rather not see it, quite honestly, or wait for the Blu-ray bonus content. When it comes to marketing for a film, I want to see Jyn Erso walk out onto that catwalk and face down the TIE fighter. That was presented in the trailer. We never saw that. Isn't that kind of phony anticipation when that stuff gets planted?
Hold on now. Let's go back, though, and talk real quick about what you were saying about there's not really a precedent for a film to be promoted this far in advance.
Well, no, I didn't say that, but when it comes to the Super Bowl,
yeah.
And if you look at the past few Super Bowls, you don't see any movie studios pushing their December films during the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. But if we go back and just look at the sequel trilogy here, I've just pulled up some dates. And as you mentioned, Jim, the Force Awakens, that was a rarity. We had a trailer that was released on Black Friday, November 28th, 2014, and that was about 13 months prior to the December 2015 release date of the film. And that one, to your point, we hadn't seen Star Wars in the theaters for over a decade. What was it going to look like? There was angst, and I also think that that Disney was feeling the pressure to show not just the fans something, but the investors something, and the people that just watch Disney pay out $4 billion to George Lucas for this property. And so I think there was pressure there. When it comes to Rogue One, this is something that I just kind of was reminded of. Do you remember that there was talk that Lucasfilm Disney needed to wait until Mission Impossible Rogue Nation?
Yes. Yeah, there was a gentleman's agreement between the two studios that Disney would wait through a specific window and they would wait it out. So there wasn't any kind of confusion about two Rogue movies being promoted at the same time, because people are just that stupid. You know, what is it? Mission Impossible? What is it? Star Wars? I don't know what I'm looking at here. I'm not going to either of them.
They thought they would be all confused.
Yeah, so confused. Can't figure it out. Can't tell the difference between a Mission Impossible film and a Star Wars film.
Now, the very first, you can't even recall it a look, because do you remember at Star Wars Celebration, they had that Billy Mack, brother Billy Mack, was the only one of the three of us that went in and saw it. He saw the Gareth Edwards panel, and there was a kind of what came out of it was this, and it wasn't Bill that did this, but it was a shaky camera phone shot of that little teaser, and it was wasn't it like was it a fighter that took off?
No, but
it broke the atmosphere, and then you saw the Death Star kind of hanging over the planet.
Yeah,
right?
what it represented was your perspective as a pilot flying over the canopy of what was presumably Yavin Base. Couldn't really tell.
Right.
It looked kind of like a tropical jungle environment, and you saw that all going by you real fast, and then it panned up, and you saw on the horizon the Death Star rising like the moon, you know?
Yeah.
And
really
so
cool.
It was cool. And somebody said, hey, I think they may have reused that footage of, flying over the canopy of trees and everything. Because if you look closely at Solo, at the very end, when they go to visit Lando on that tropical planet where he's in the card room playing, they show a very similar shot to that, flying above a canopy of trees in a tropical environment. Somebody said, I think that's the same shot that they used for that Rogue One teaser, that motion poster is what they called it, essentially.
Right, yeah, the motion. And it had a voiceover. It was Obi-Wan, Alec Guinness, doing the whole, for more than 1,000 generations, the Jedi Knights were the guardians of peace and justice in the Old Republic. That whole bit. But we did not get the first official teaser for Rogue One. And I remember us saying, well, this movie's just a few months away. You know, where is it? We didn't get it until April.
Right.
That was the first official teaser.
For a December release.
And
we're going to get the first teaser for Episode 9 in April for a December release.
Yep.
That's what's going to happen. It's going to be at Star Wars Celebration.
Yeah, and then the first trailer for Last Jedi was in April of 2017.
So you see, with these December releases.
Yep, you're right.
The marketing push doesn't begin until April. When we were hosting the stage at Star Wars Celebration 7, or Celebration Anaheim, they had told us that the marketing push for Rogue One was going to kick off at Star Wars Celebration. So that's why I presume that the marketing push for Episode 9 is going to happen at Star Wars Celebration.
Yeah. No, it makes all the sense in the world. And I didn't go back and look and see when titles were released. Honestly, maybe, I don't know, I have to turn in my fan card or something, but the title does not really mean all that much to me. I'll be honest. However, if you're interested in rumors, this Balance of the Force showed up today, and allegedly someone on Reddit was able to grab a screenshot from StarWars.com. So I don't know if they were just kind of pecking around, and you know, some people kind of play around with the URL strings and try to find do different combinations and sort of crack the code, because they have these pages built days in advance of the release of something like this, and then
on any web page you can find all of the code there for the page. Essentially, you can see it. And so that's what I think someone was digging around with. What do? You hit F9 on your keyboard or something, and all that stuff pops up. So somebody was doing that, and they saw Star Wars Balance of the Force in that coding. And so they're running with it, saying, well, they're planting this right now because the announcement's coming soon, so they want to be ready for it. And Balance of the Force is going to be the name of it. We've heard other names for Episode 9. I've been hearing the name Balance of the Force being thrown around since Episode 1. since prior to that announcement when they said the Phantom Menace, I was like, the Phantom Menace, Balance of the Force sounds so much cooler. But I love the name. I love the title. However, I think it's already been applied to a Star Wars app. Isn't there an app called Balance of the Force where you play like a video pinball game on it?
Let's see.
So that's
there is a Star Wars pinball game over at StarWars.com called Balance of the Force. You're absolutely right. Well, I shouldn't say it's on. It's available on to download various app stores. Star Wars pinball, Balance of the Force. So there is prior art for this title. Now the screen capture that was allegedly pulled from the StarWars.com website does have the logo, in the now familiar sequel trilogy logo lockup look, where you have Star and Wars separated by the title of the film in between the two words. Mm-hmm. So they got it, and it's actually a purple treatment. So, we had blue for Ep 9, we had the red for The Last Jedi, and now we've got a purple, which could, in some ways, represent a, what do you get when you mix blue and red? You got purple, and so that is the balance right there. Or it means Crazy Mace Windu is coming back with lightsaber in tow.
Now we're talking.
Yeah.
Crazy Mace's Revenge. Episode 9, Crazy Mace's Revenge.
Yeah, they just go totally nuts.
Yeah. How can you be on the council and not be a master?
Shut the up! Young Skywalker.
Yeah.
But for those of you that are out there thinking that the trailer is late, you'd be wrong if you look at what history has to teach us. But at the same time, they have made exceptions. They made an exception with Episode 7. This is the supposedly the end of the Skywalker trilogy, so there could be exceptions made. Plus, something that I was thinking about, Jim, and I want to get your take on this. Obviously, you don't want to go and rehash all of the, this fan versus that fan, and these fans liked the movie, these fans didn't. But we have to acknowledge the fact that there was a split amongst Star Wars fans, those who liked The Last Jedi, those who didn't, and then it kind of fractured beyond that, and those who, like Disney Star Wars, those who don't, et cetera, et cetera. I want to ask you, is there, just looking at the trailer, I'm talking about the film, is there a way out? Is there a way for Disney and Lucasfilm to win with this trailer? Will this trailer solve anything in the battle of fan versus fan?
That's a great question.
I don't think they can do it in 90 seconds.
I don't think we have the substance to do anything more than maybe just put a little Band-Aid on the wound and maybe get people to start thinking a little bit more forward, and start considering what the possibilities of Episode 9 really are, as opposed to wringing their hands over what Episode 8 wasn't. So, I think any infusion of fresh Star Wars content right now would be good for the fractured fan base. Yes. Anything right
Star
now.
Wars. Okay.
Anything. Even the title announcement, I think, will soothe some wounds a little bit and push the conversation in a more forward direction.
Okay, so what you're saying is, regardless of what it is, at least it'll get people talking about something other than what they didn't like, say, about Last Jedi or Solo or something like that. Oh, so it changes the conversation. Okay, that's fair. But what I was thinking about is more like, okay, what, in order for the fan base to sort of come together, what would they need to show in this trailer? And I thought, okay, well, they need to, one of the biggest gripes was Luke Skywalker, the treatment of Luke, and now we lost Luke, and right after we lost Han, and so, okay, well, we see Luke doing something amazing in the trailer.
Yes.
And then I thought, well...
And maybe smiling about it, too, I mean, yeah, right. Showing some element of his personality that resembles the optimistic and loyal guy that we know from the original trilogy.
Yes, so a glimmer of the old Luke Skywalker.
Yes.
But is that something we would likely see in a trailer? I just keep thinking, well, that would be something that they would save for the film release. You
right.
know?
I don't even think that they would include Luke in any of the marketing.
I agree. I think that Luke is going to be. Well, you know, when the Episode 8 trailer came out, I remember we were saying, "Oh man, there was no Chewie, we're home" moment. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, the trailer came out and it really did. I think I remember when we us sitting in the hotel and talking about the trailer. It confused us more than anything else. And I do remember, and the one thing that does hold up, I think, from that initial reaction was that there was no big Chewie, we're home moment.
Yeah, there wasn't.
And so I doubt that there's going to be one with this trailer. So my theory is, I don't think the trailer is going to do much in terms of making people feel better or worse. I think that the people going to hate, and they're waiting for the trailer to come out just so they have more fodder to dish about. And then the people who, you know, see nothing wrong with what has come out since the acquisition are going to feel, you know, they're going to continue to feel the same way. The film is really what matters. That's stating the obvious, you know, clearly. So I guess what I'm trying to say is the trailer is not really going to solve anything. And I don't think it's going to give us any great clues. We know so much about the characters now. So, you know, showing some new shots of Kylo and Rey and Finn and Poe is likely not to really hold or give us many great clues. Though John Boyega has said that he's growing his hair out a little bit for the film.
I saw pictures of him, and he has not really done anything noticeable with his hair.
Oh, really?
I don't know what he's talking
Unless maybe he's going to have CG hair.
Well, then why did he have to grow it out?
Well, good point.
He looks the same.
All right, so he's not doing that.
Maybe he wasn't talking about the hair on his head.
Okay. Well, he did say that maybe, or that perhaps we were looking at a year gap between episodes 8 and 9. But one thing I don't think we're going to see is I don't think we're going to see Leia in the trailer. We're obviously not going to see Han Solo in the trailer. And I don't think we're going to see Luke Skywalker in the trailer. I think this trailer is going to be solely focused on Rey, Finn, Poe, Chewie, BB-8, Hux, Kylo.
Would be nice to see R2 and 3PO in there.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. Yeah.
Together.
I mean, Anthony Daniels was on Twitter sort of teasing something's coming, and then he speculated that it was a trailer or a title. But he indicated also that he's done filming, so there's a confirmation that he is in the movie. I mean, that's been confirmed before, but they also said that Kenny Baker was in episode 7, and we know that wasn't true. Really?
No, yeah, Kenny wasn't. I don't think he was capable.
Right. He had a credit, though, in the film.
That is interesting. He had a credit for the film, but I don't think he ever got in a tin can and shook it around or anything.
No, I don't think so either. I think it was more of an honorary thing, and then later the name of the actor that was inside R2. I think there was somebody inside. There were some shots where R2 was doing the little rattle.
Yeah, Jimmy V is the guy's name.
Oh yeah, Jimmy V. That sounds familiar.
Hey, you brought up that great trailer moment. Chewie, we're home.
Yeah.
And I do want to point out that that's an alternate take from what they used in the final film.
Is it really? I never compared.
If you look, you'll see that Harrison has more of a, that kind of half grin sort of when he says we're home. He kind of does that little smile out of the corner of his mouth. If you look at the film, he doesn't do that. His eyebrows go up when he says we're home.
Oh.
And it's more like, we belong here, as opposed to, this is good.
Yeah, to this day, I could watch that scene 50 times. every day. I love that scene. I love the whole sequence. What can I say? I'm a total fanboy when it comes to episode 7.
I have found myself watching.
Love it.
I have found myself watching it lately, and
it's so fun. It's so fun and funny. There's a story here. I don't want to skip to the news necessarily, but
of course they've been showing a lot of Star Wars movies lately on, I believe is TBS. Is that where they've been?
TNT.
TNT.
Yeah,
on TNT, and so I've been catching them, small marathons, and it's been kind of cool. They were showing the original trilogy a couple of weekends ago, and I turned on my TV and I was like, "Oh yeah, Empire." And then I flipped the channel and I saw it was A New Hope. And so I just started going back and forth between the two of them.
Oh, like, Sophie's choice.
Yeah. I was like in this feedback loop, this Star Wars feedback loop. And I was like, what should I watch? I finally settled on Empire, which surprised me. Typically, I'd settle on A New Hope.
I know you're a big A New Hope guy.
Very loyal, very loyal
to that first film, and that obviously
none of this would be here without that movie. So.
I agree. I want to throw this out, and we'll come back in news and talk about it. But I mentioned how funny I think Force Awakens is, and I've heard from so many fans over the years of Star Wars that sometimes life gets in the way, and you find yourself going a couple or 3 months without putting a Star Wars movie in. Maybe you don't put in one of the classic films, and you finally do. And we, Jim, you see the emails. People go, gosh, sometimes I forget how funny these movies are. And I think that that's really true. However, this is a piece over on Slash Film. There's an interview with Taika Waititi, who is the director of Thor Ragnarok and What We Do in the Shadows, but is also one of the directors of Star Wars The Mandalorian that's coming to Disney Plus. And he was interviewed, and they were talking about his work on this show. And he, of course, coming out of the Marvel-verse, he was asked about the difference, and he says, well, Star Wars is very different to Marvel style. I would agree with that. He says they know the tone of the first films really should be adhered to. That's what the fans like, and you can't really disrespect it. I guess that's a nicer way of saying you can't put too many jokes in. I don't know that I agree with that. Do you think that Star Wars doesn't handle jokes well?
No, there's a lot of humor, especially in that first film. I think if the humor gets too snarky, and if the humor gets too contemporary, like your mother jokes, okay?
Yeah.
Your mother jokes might be a little too contemporary in real world. Granted, he was being cocky and blowing a bunch of you-know-what at Hux when he said it. But your yo mama joke, in Star Wars, it's just...
Yeah, I didn't really care for the switchboard operator thing, too. That was also a little too real world. And look, this stuff's not easy. I'm not sitting here on a high horse saying, oh, I could have written this better. I'm not saying that. But I mean, we've been podcasting about Star Wars for 13 years, talked to people like Dave Filoni, also people who have written things like the Lego specials and everyone points to the fact that Star Wars dialogue isn't easy. Look, if it was easy, everyone could do it. But I like that you said that not only can it not be too contemporary, but it can't be too snarky. There is an innocence, and maybe that's not the right word, but it's the best word that comes to my mind. There's an innocence and a purity about Star Wars, and it's without cynicism. Star Wars is not cynical.
Well, it's a very classic movie land, sort of old school Hollywood way of presenting dialogue. Mm-hmm. It really is. Even from the rhythms they speak in, especially in that first film. This bucket of balls will never get us past that blockade. Way,
Eddie G. Robinson could have been in Star Wars.
Yeah. I mean, he could have played a very interesting character too.
Grand Moff Tarkin, say, yeah.
Yeah, we're going to blow up your planet, see? Now step aside, give me a sarsaparilla. No. Yeah. Like Star Wars in the 30s would have been a hoot.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, look, when you think about George and what a student he was of classic film, it's natural. It's natural that he would sort of be drawn to that. And serials, think about how much they were trying to pack into those serials in a half hour or 20 minutes or however long that they were, little, things that preceded some of the films. So there's a lot to pack in there. And George was trying to tell a very big story in a relatively short amount of time. And so you do tend to, try to get as much in there as possible. Anyway, I thought that was interesting, and we'll have more, hopefully, if we get back to it. Taika, I hope I'm saying that right. Taika Waititi, very talented guy, and what he had to say about working on The Mandalorian. But you know what? Let's check it out. What's going on in the world of Rebel Force Radio, the mailbag, the voicemail lines. I think we've, who's this? We got, from Phoenix, Eric from Phoenix. He's, got something to say here. Take it away, Eric.
Hey, Jason. Hey, Jimmy. This is Eric from Phoenix. Just got done, actually a couple days ago, got done listening to the latest RFR. And first of all, I just have to say, Puppet Lando, a.k.a. Billy Mack, with an actual Puppet Lando is classic. And, we got a kick out of listening to that and then seeing the video. And I thought Billy Mack actually did a pretty good job doing the puppet movement while trying to talk. That's not an easy thing to do, and I'm sure he's been practicing all week.
Oh, I bet he
ready
has.
for the next time he's on. But in your episode, you guys spent a lot of time talking about kind of some rumors that are out there for episode 9, and one of them was the theory that Luke's actually dead. And the funny thing about that is I actually called in to you guys a couple months before episode 8 came out, and that was my theory. Because at the time you guys had been talking about the scene shown of Luke, and I don't know, I speculated that he was actually dead the whole time. You guys actually played that on your episode, and clearly, we went to the movie. So I still think I'm about 50% right on that. After seeing episode 8, is it possible Luke's actually dead? Sure. Is it plausible? I don't think so. I just think there's so much work that they would have to do to kind of explain all that. I think it's way easier to bring him back, like they did with Yoda in episode 8, where he's dead, but he comes back and he's physically somewhat there because he's able to bonk Luke with his little stick. So I just don't think Luke actually was already dead. I just think it's too much work and take up too much time with the story. So anyway, keep up the great work and look forward to listening to this week's episode. Take care, guys.
Thank you, Eric. And wow, you know what? You're a very prophetic guy. The fact that you called that a rumor before it was actually a rumor, although it's probably more of a meme right now than it is a rumor. But Jim, this is something we hear quite a bit about, which is this people point to this little bonk on the head that Yoda gives to Luke with his stick in The Last Jedi, and they point to that as some sort of foreshadowing, as well. This means that the Force ghosts have really found a way to do this, that, or the other thing. Let me give you my opinion, and then I'll see what your take is. I don't think that there was any premeditation there. I don't think that was Rian Johnson or anybody saying, hey, let's really push the envelope or push the boundaries on what a Force ghost can and cannot do. This was not Patrick Swayze learning to kick the can in Ghost. This was just a little bit that they gave to Yoda without, I think, any thought at all.
Any legit thought going behind it. Well, to me, it just makes it seem more like Luke is really dead because another dead entity can make contact with him. If Luke was alive, then Yoda wouldn't be able to knock him on the head with the cane.
Wow. Okay. That's pretty cool. I like that, actually. That's the best explanation for that.
Think about it. Luke and Rey, do they ever make physical contact? I think they do. He grabs her by the arm and puts her hand onto the rock.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so they do actually make physical contact.
They do.
So that would discount.
Well, but look
that,
at what look at what happens with the Force FaceTime or Force Skype. He feels and sees the rain. They touch each other, and they're not physically together. So
maybe they're all dead. Maybe just everyone is dead in Star Wars.
They're all dead. They were all on Alderaan.
They're all dead. Yeah, they're all.
And it's all
going to be the big twist.
Oh gosh. Well, anyway, thank you very much for the voicemail.
Can we do another one? See, because I feel bad. I don't remember his. It sounds like he called in before The Last Jedi came out.
That's what he's saying, and had this idea that,
and he laid that on us, and that's actually speculation for Episode 8.
Yeah,
that is now being moved over to Episode 9.
Well, look at some of these rumors, they just keep pushing, down the line.
Well, again, with the balance of the Force, that was a rumor I heard prior to Episode 1, mid-90s, and now it's back. And so, rumors never die.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Who do we have here? This is from L.A. Is it Gorelli?
Hey, guys. What's up? It's your biggest fan, girl, Ellie, from Los Angeles. I'm in the middle of listening to your latest episode and wanted to comment on something you guys said. So you guys mentioned how in the sequel trilogy, a lot of the important plot lines are happening off-screen, particularly Luke and Ben Solo's relationship before he fell to the dark side and became Kylo Ren. So one thing I'm really hoping happens, and that I think would be super awesome, is that after Episode 9, they put out another Filoni animated series following Luke training Ben and the rest of the young Jedi, kind of like how they followed Anakin and Obi-Wan during Clone Wars between Episodes 2 and 3. So my questions for you guys are, do you think that this could be a possibility? Would you even want this to be a possibility?
Yes.
And what are some of the things you'd want to see happen if they did do this? And then also wanted to say thank you guys for consistently putting out awesome content. I don't really have many friends who are into Star Wars the way I am, so thank you for giving me an outlet for always getting my Star Wars fix. And then side note, when I was home for this past Christmas, I was listening to one of your last episodes of 2018 while I was cooking, and my mom said, "What are you listening to? God, you're such a nerd." Anyway, love you guys, and I hope you guys keep killing it.
Oh, we love you too. Thank you for that. Mom, here's Mom. What is this, some kind of nerd thing? Wow, that was really nice. Thank you for those kind words. And you know what? You're wrong. She said she doesn't have any friends that love Star Wars. Well, she's got you and me. So we're friends and we love Star Wars. And thank you so much for that. Would I love a Dave Filoni helmed animated series about Luke training the next generation of Jedi and detailing the perhaps the fall of Kylo Ren? Where do I sign for that?
Right, I mean, voiced by Mark Hamill.
Oh,
Luke, voiced by Mark. Let's take it up a notch.
How badly do I want that? I don't know. I think I've got an extra kidney here. I would probably give up for that.
So
Jim,
what's so hard about this?
What do you think?
Let's get this sucker into development. I mean, this is a no-brainer. This is what fans want. We don't want to see Kaz the Spaz running around every week on that platform. We want to see legitimate, legendary, iconic Star Wars characters doing legendary, iconic Star Wars things in a movie or a series. And I think with the rise of Disney Plus, clearly a top priority for Bob Iger and the Disney company, and we'll be hearing more about that in news headlines. But with the rise of this platform, it is going to be imperative that Disney provide home-brewed content for their app. And they're looking to take on all the biggies. They're looking to take on Netflix. They're looking to take on Amazon. They want to be serious players in this event. And they're going to be leaning hard on their franchise properties. And Star Wars is one of those. It's one of the jewels in the portfolio. So they're going to want to be squeezing as much streaming content out of Star Wars. In very much a similar fashion, they wanted to squeeze as much content out of cinematic Star Wars after they made the purchase in 2012. And here we are now in 2019, 4 films later, and looking at this streaming platform on the horizon that certainly seems to be top priority, and they're going to want to fill it up with Star Wars content. We already know of 3 things that are going to be landing on Disney Plus: Clone Wars animated, The Mandalorian, and the Cassian show.
Yeah.
So I hope they don't call it the Cassian show too, by the way.
I don't think that's more like a variety show sort of vibe. It's Cassian Andor, and he comes running down the stairs and jumps
like
on
Death
the piano.
Troopers on ice, you know.
We don't want that. But what I really like about her observation is the way that she positions this, where this is very much like, we wanted to see the relationship between Obi-Wan and Anakin unfold. We didn't get to see that in the films. Likewise, there's this great backstory of what happened with Luke's nephew, the split between Han and Leia, the courting of Ben Solo by Snoke. I mean, this would be an amazing thing to see as an animated series and helmed by somebody like Dave Filoni. I mean, forget about it.
Or an animated feature.
Yeah.
These are the things that I'd love to see. And listen, okay, so I call him Kaz the Spaz, whatever. I do actually like Star Wars Resistance. I love getting all kind of Star Wars content. But I don't put Star Wars Resistance on that pedestal that I put all the rest, because it just doesn't deserve to be up there. While it's entertaining and pretty to look at, it lacks so much substance. It has good characters. There's no storyline that is compelling at all in the show.
I don't think that it's trying to be that.
It's not. It's just filler, and it feels like filler. And I'm saying that I have all the Resistance action figures here in front of me. I'm looking at Commander Pyre. I thought the episode that aired just this past week it was a pretty good one. It featured stormtroopers and all kind of stuff. It's just I can't get behind someone like Kaz, and I don't know what the purpose of this show is. It's just eye candy. It's fluff. It's fine. It's really well done fluff, too. But at the end of the day, it's fluff.
Yeah.
It's fun but dumb.
All right, we got one more here. This is Tim from New Jersey. One more voicemail. We'll come back later. But
hey, guys. This is Tim from New Jersey. So I was listening to the January 25th podcast, and I just want to add that my wife also cries at every episode of the Goldbergs.
That last 5 minutes.
I told her about the episode. She says, minute 19 is when they start you going, and it goes to commercial and comes right back, and then that's where they get you. It's come to the point where I don't even watch the last part of the Goldbergs. I just turn my head and watch her start crying.
Let's give her a hug.
At me, but it's worth it. So I'm just tell your wife, she's not the only one. My wife also is a chronic Goldberg's crier. Thanks.
That's awesome. Tim from New Jersey. Appreciate that. So, Jim, Wendy's not alone.
No.
There's a gal in New
even
Jersey
occasionally I might even feel my, icicles of heartstrings start to get pulled a little bit. But, they get you in the last segment of the show. It's always like,
That's when I realized that my dad really is a hard-working guy who loves us.
It is upon us. Return of the Jedi. That's right, they did it again. And guess what? It opens Friday at the Highway Theater.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Go away.
You clearly don't understand what I'm saying. More Star Wars.
That kid kills me.
He's great. He's a great little actor too. God, I don't know his name. He is such a good actor. That Adam Goldberg.
He's great. The whole cast. I mean, that ensemble is fantastic, and it reminds me a bit of what was it? Malcolm in the Middle, where it was almost like a cartoon come to life. That's what I think about the Goldbergs.
It's very similar vibes. Also, like the Wonder Years, and things like that, but with chock full of Star Wars references.
You love Star Wars.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. All right. Hey, if you haven't subscribed to Rebel Force Radio over on YouTube, we would love for you to do that. Jim has been very, very hard at work, as he always is, but very, very hard at work in this case of going back through 13 years of archives and pulling out some of the best bits, and not just classic bits, but last week when we were giving given the great gift of Puppet Lando. Those antics that were caught on video in the studio there in Chicago were posted up quickly over on the YouTube channel, RFR, so you can actually see Brother Billy Mack as he's using the puppet. Really, I mean, if you think the audio is great, you got to see the puppet. It's got the craziest googly eyes, and it's one of those faces that just makes you laugh no matter what. But Jim, recently you got some feedback from some of our loyal Patreon supporters about having even better access to some of that content that's showing up on YouTube.
Yeah, that's right, Jason. With all the things we're posting up to YouTube, we're also making available as exclusive audio-only files for our Patreon members, for all members of the Patreon community. So it shows up in your RSS feed. So you don't have to be poking around with YouTube while you're trying to drive a car or something like that. We received an email from one of our loyal RFR Patreon community members, Rick, from Brisbane, Australia, who told us that he could get in huge trouble if those Australian cops pull him over and see the YouTube app is open on his phone. I guess they have laws about that in Australia, and I think they have a lot of laws about that here in the United States as well.
I'm in trouble.
Jason watching full episodes of television shows on his commute from Cleveland to Canton. My goodness. I mean, so many lives at risk. It's so irresponsible. But our guy Rick in Australia, he's doing the right thing and just listening to the audio, but we don't want him to have that YouTube app open. So we are making exclusive audio files of everything we post on the YouTube, also available for the Patreon community. And if you use your customized RSS code that is right there on the RFR homepage, all you have to do is copy that thing and paste it into iTunes or the podcast player of your choice, and it will populate your podcast catcher with all of the exclusive RFR Patreon audio. So we're releasing a lot of stuff too. We just put the Darth Plagueis roundtable up there, where there's a lot of very interesting conversation about the connection between Darth Plagueis, Darth Sidious, and Anakin Skywalker. And we speculate whether or not those two cats are responsible for the birth of Anakin. And it's a really interesting conversation. All kind of different things, too. Little short bits from old shows. Comedy. Interview highlights, and so much more. Plus, the Filoni files. Yes. Full interviews available on Patreon and excerpts available on YouTube. So all right there at your fingertips. The Billy D quote of the week, also available on YouTube, and then so much more available to our Patreon community. I was just flipping through all of the releases that we put out just in the last year alone, and it's I'm kind of impressed with the amount of content that's there. Also on Patreon, you get exclusive shows like RFR Rush Hour, which I hope we have a new episode coming out very soon. RFR Q&A, which features members of the Patreon community having deep and way down and dirty conversations about all things Star Wars.
I keep waiting for you to hook me up with one of these guys.
Or
we got girls.
We haven't been doing it for a couple of months. Not in 2019. We have not released a new episode of Q&A. So we're going to have to get on that pretty soon, and I'll try to schedule it when you're available, Jason.
Yeah.
And then, of course, dips into the archive with RFR Rewind, and then the RFR All Access tier gets all kind of cool things like outtakes from shows and very rare Star Wars convention panels and other press conferences, events that I've recorded over the years. I'm releasing all of that stuff from my personal archives in unedited form for the Patreon community to listen to and enjoy. And there's new ideas happening all the time. Ringtones, got to get back to providing some more ringtones. And when we finally get around to announcing our big events, I said that plural, events for Star Wars Celebration Chicago, our Patreon community will be the first to know and the first to have access to tickets. So we hope to be making an announcement on that very soon in the month of February. More deets to come, so stay tuned for Star Wars Celebration RFR party announcements. And we're working on a couple of cool things. So stay tuned for that. If you're a member of the RFR Patreon community, of course, you will be the first to know.
One of our good, dear friends and recent newlyweds, our pal Steve Glosson, he's got a special event coming up this weekend. So if you're listening to the show as it's released, we're talking about Saturday, February 9th. Steve Glosson, who is the emperor of the Goliverse, is having his 5th annual podcast marathon for Cure, C-U-R-E, to cure childhood cancer. And you can listen to this live. We use Mixlr. It's a great way to listen to all kinds of different live content providers. That's Mixlr.com, Mixlr.com/Goliverse, G-O-L-I-V-E-R-S-E. And there'll be, as well as at geekoutOnline.com/cure and BigHonkinShow.com/cure. So it's a marathon. It starts at 10 a.m. It starts with the Big Honkin' Show, and various guests will be dropping by throughout the day, including Jimmy Mack, yours truly, other friends of the Goliverse. They're going to be doing a movie commentary, live call-ins from listeners, and Steve is a super talented guy and just one of the nicest fellows you could ever possibly meet. And did I mention he was recently married? Yeah, recently married. Steve Glosson, and they got a big goal, $4,000 they're hoping to raise for the cure for childhood cancers. So he's looking to everyone's help to chip in. So if you can listen or if you can go on and make a donation, please do so. We would appreciate it very much. And I know Steve would appreciate it as well. As I say, he's such a great guy, good friend of us here at Rebel Force Radio, and it's an amazing, amazing cause. So go over there and support Steve.
I've been standing in line since I don't know when, so I can buy the first ticket, be the first one in. I hope it all turns out just the way I want it to be.
Tell me what you want.
I want lightsaber fights and some X-Wing ships, to learn the big secret of Kylo Ren, and a king-size tub of popcorn for 10 plus me.
So what you need?
I need a job that won't mind if I miss it, in a nice big tent with a bathroom in it. Gonna join the RFR team when they finally hear about me. I want a fresh new story with our old stars. I kinda hope they don't build a third Death Star, but if they have a dewback or two, it's just fine with me.
But doesn't seem to miss you.
I'm getting so hyped up I'll probably go insane. I really wish they'd tell me Rey's last name, 'cause we all just wanna see the new Star Wars and buy new Han Solo figures when they're at the store, to learn more about the droid BB-8. I can't wait to be there when the Force awakes, and we'll hang out at the midnight show. It will be in the winter, so I hope it don't snow. Those big yellow words will be sweeping the nation. Know you all cried back in celebration. Well, hey, hey, I want to see new Star Wars. Hey, hey, I want to see new Star Wars. Yeah.
Yeah. I have good news for you, my lord.
That's good news. Come closer, I have good news.
All right, shareholders. That's why you're listening, right? You're all Disney shareholders. Oh, we're gonna talk about the big Q1 investors conference call hosted by Bob Iger that happened today as we're recording this show. Why is it interesting to us as Star Wars fans? Well, it's the opportunity for the big cheese there. Is that appropriate since it's a mouse company? The big cheese. Well, Bob Iger, right? The CEO, of course, of Disney, and this is the time where he reassures all of the shareholders about how great things are at the House of Mouse. And Jim, were you invited? Were you there?
I was not there, but the RFR microphones were.
Oh, excellent.
Yes.
Okay. So Bob got those. We sent him the microphones, and he sits them right there on the desk as he makes these pronouncements. So what broke? What were the big takeaways from the conference call?
Well, the biggest takeaway is clearly they're prioritizing, as a company, they are prioritizing competing with Netflix and Amazon and getting this Disney Plus app up off the air, the streaming service. And so since we're talking about that, let's just jump to clip number 2.
Okay.
Because Iger did sort of shine some light on Disney Plus and gave us a really good clue as to when we're going to be able to get more information and actually see this thing for ourselves.
Presented with an overabundance of choice, consumers look to brands they know to sort through the options and find what they actually want. The DTC space is no different in that regard, and we're confident our iconic brands and franchises will allow us to effectively break through the competitive clutter and connect with consumers. We'll also use our brand to help subscribers quickly navigate the content on Disney Plus, creating an efficient interface that enhances their experience and their affinity for the service. We'll demonstrate the Disney Plus platform and showcase some of the original content we're creating for it at our Investor Day on April 11th.
There you go. So that's when we're finally going to see probably our first glimpse of The Mandalorian and maybe some more Clone Wars stuff and a bunch of other things that Disney Plus has to offer. And that date, April 11th,
that sounds familiar, right?
happens to fall on the first day of Star Wars Celebration.
Oh,
now,
boy.
We know that first day is going to be just like the dealer floor is going to be open and some exhibits, fan rooms, and things like that. There are not going to be any panels on that day, that first day, that Thursday, April 11th. The first panels will kick off on Friday morning at Star Wars Celebration. So they're going to want to show their investors everything first. So this quite possibly could take a little bit of the wind out of the sails for big reveals at Star Wars Celebration. I think we might be getting a reveal of The Mandalorian maybe prior to the first panels of Star Wars Celebration. Now, I mean, there could be something happening on the 11th.
Yeah.
There must be something happening.
Yeah.
Like, stand in line for this room and you could go in there and watch some footage from The Mandalorian or something. Maybe I'm jumping the gun altogether, and the Disney Plus reveals will be more in the nature of things like Marvel and Pixar and other Disney studio properties. Not to oversaturate.
They got to balance it, Jim. When you think about you've got 5 days there, the 11th through the 15th, and you got to have the big Ep9 trailer debut. And you've got The Mandalorian, which is probably a preview or a trailer, or, who knows? Maybe they'll play the first 10 minutes of the first episode.
Right.
Or maybe they'll put maybe the whole first episode. Imagine that. Stand in that line for a, day and a half.
Yeah.
Jeez.
That's what'll be happening, though. And,
that happened a lot with Clone Wars.
Yeah.
At various events.
Yeah,
they would premiere
debut,
episodes.
Episodes of the Clone Wars, months and months in advance of them actually being broadcast. Same thing with Rebels. Yeah. Remember the Darth Vader? I think the very first appearance of Darth Vader on Star Wars Rebels was screened at Star Wars Celebration in 2015 and didn't, and so that would have been April. So the series didn't even kick off season 2 until October that year. So a very wide open window. Spoiler phobes be warned now.
Yeah.
But so you hear Iger, he talks a little bit about the Disney Plus. He's reading a prepared statement there at the beginning of his Q1 Investors conference call. But then he starts taking questions. And I like the Bob Iger that isn't reading from a prepared statement. I like him when he's more off the cuff. And the only time Star Wars really gets brought up again is when one of the callers asks him specifically about Galaxy's Edge and how the marketing rollout for that is going to happen. And and Iger was he was no nonsense about it.
On the marketing expense side, don't expect much. I'm thinking that maybe I should just tweet, "It's opening," and that will be enough. I think we're going to end up with incredibly popular and in-demand product with these 2 new lands. They're large, they're beautiful, and they're extremely innovative, and they obviously leverage the popularity of the Star Wars brand. And I think that we're going to have absolutely no problem gaining attention for them or to them, and it's not going to take much marketing to do that.
No, he's going to have to stick his head out the window and say, "It's open."
Yeah, right. I mean, there's a lot of anxiety about the foot traffic and the population being greatly expanded on a typical park day, so much so that there's been this operation going on at Disneyland called Operation Stardust. Ring any bells? And seriously, they call it Stardust. And it's this subtle thing that's been happening to the parks where certain pathways have been widened. There's just been more accessibility to certain areas of the park that weren't there normally. And I mean, these are just like little minor changes just to accommodate what they anticipate to be an additional flow of people into these parks.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. I mean, you've got the average traffic at the park, which is substantial, particularly at certain times of year. Mm-hmm. And then you add this. This is, Jim, this is like putting a Star Wars celebration at the park every day.
Right, yeah. And everyone's going to want to see these rides because they're going to be really, top of the technology, cutting edge, the most incredible ride. And they should be, if you're talking about Star Wars, they should be groundbreaking. Whatever the technology is, it needs to be groundbreaking. When Star Tours first opened up, that technology was groundbreaking and very appropriate for the Star Wars franchise. So the rides and attractions that they put into Galaxy's Edge should be really top of the line when it comes to amusement park tech.
I got to tell you, the person whose review I want the most on all this is George. I mean, really, when you think about it, I mean, you've got George, who's the creator of all of this, coupled with the fact that he is like a Disney super fan, in terms of the parks. I mean, an absolute super fan. This must just be, I can only imagine what this would be like for him.
It would be, it would be interesting if it wasn't like a press conference or a situation like that. If somebody could actually follow George around documentary style.
Yes.
Where the cameras aren't just all up in his face all the time, and or the cameras are just always there and he doesn't even notice them after a while, which is what great documentarians can get out of their subjects. And if somebody could do that with Lucas, that would be fantastic. But I don't think I think we'd just still get, it's very good. He would never be effusive. He wouldn't be descriptive. He would just
I don't know. Did we hear that he, what was his favorite ride? And there was a song that was associated with it. And is this sounding familiar at all to you? And like he got up and sang the song. We heard from somebody.
No.
Yeah.
George singing?
Yes. Now, hopefully one of our listeners will say, "Oh yeah, right." But we had someone on, or it was a clip of someone talking about going to an event at the Disney parks with George. And his favorite ride was there like a hula?
I think it was the Tiki Room.
The Tiki Room.
Yes.
The Tiki Room. And someone was talking about George being in the Tiki Room and singing.
Our friend Aljon Go from Sorcerer Radio. Our old friend Aljon, who knows about everything happening in the Disney parks. We should get caught up with Aljon as we get closer to the park opening and get his take on what's happening there.
Yeah, hell of a guitar player too, Aljon.
Hell of a guitar player. He's been with the Gibson Company for years and years, and now he's a representative of the Epiphone brand. And he was posting a bunch of pictures recently of him at the NAMM convention where all the musicians hang out. And Aljon knows everything that's going on with the Disney parks. And, he told us some great story about George Singing in the tiki rooms. Yeah, I remember that. So you know what? I'll dig up that old story and I'll throw it out on the YouTube.
Yeah, because I think we've got a little. I think our camera or our microphones might have been there or something
wacky like that.
Tiki 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 tiki.
Yeah, all right. I'll find that clip and we'll put it up on our YouTube feed and for our Patreon community.
So beyond that, so no talk of The Last Jedi, no talk of
no
future films beyond Last Jedi or anything like that, huh?
No, not that I picked up.
Yeah.
You know, he might have mentioned The Last Jedi somewhere in his prepared statement at the beginning, but I was more interested in the Q&A part of his conference call because that's when you get the real info typically. A lot of people have said, oh, Bob Iger, he's not going to say anything of importance at this conference call, and he really didn't this time around as far as Star Wars goes. But in the past, he has dropped some big bombshells during these investors' calls, and I think we heard about the Rogue One film for the very first time from Bob Iger during a conference call. Same thing with Rian Johnson being brought on to write and direct The Last Jedi. That announcement was made in a conference call. But we didn't get it. We just didn't get it. Like I said, all efforts are being put into the Galaxy's Edge Park when it comes to Star Wars and with the streaming service as far as Disney's perspective goes. Of course, J.J. Abrams has been working on Episode 9 for a while, and I think Bad Robot handles the heavy lifting with much of that production. Mm-hmm. Probably more so than even a lot of people at Lucasfilm have to do with it, outside of special effects and what have you. But that is just like running automatically right now. So Iger is focusing in on the things that are on the horizon. And right now the things on the horizon are Galaxy's Edge opening this summer and the Disney Plus platform launching in the fall. I don't think there's any sort of statement that we can, take out of this. We shouldn't be reading between the lines that Iger didn't make any announcements here. I don't think that that was part of his game plan, and he's talking about the things he feels comfortable letting his investors know about right now. But believe me, by the time it gets to his Q3 investors conference call, I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot about The Last Jedi. And or about episode 9.
Episode 9, yeah.
Episode 9. See, we need a title.
We do. We do. Balance of the Force, whatever. As I mentioned earlier in the show, there was an interview with Taika Waititi over at Slash Film, and why this is relevant is that Taika is just one of the very talented directors that has been confirmed to be helming an episode of the Jon Favreau series. And just a few of the things. The first thing I mentioned was what he said about humor, and we chatted about whether or not we agreed with his statement about by staying close to the tone of the first films, what that really means is you can't put too many jokes in. I think that's not necessarily true. It's the type of jokes that you throw in. But what he does confirm is that in terms of tone. It will definitely be closer to the original than the 3 prequels. He does talk a little bit about Boba Fett and the legacy. I guess the one takeaway I had is he says just the idea of bounty hunters. The helmets are so cool. Just getting to see these characters like that and getting to shoot them is pretty cool. So he's talking about multiple characters here. So there's been rumors that, this is about the underworld. There's going to be not just one bounty hunter here. There's going to be, they travel and not necessarily travel in packs, but they come in contact with one another. I mean, we saw them, a whole fivesome in Empire Strikes Back bounty hunters. But Jim, we outside of Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, it seems as though every other time that Mandalorians have shown up, or helmet-cladded Mandalorian-looking characters, they've shown up as in pairs, or in some cases, in a lot of cases, in armies or in many groups. Do you think that this Mandalorian is going to be a loner when it comes to representing the Mandalorian people, or is this going to be kind of like what we saw with Rebels, a sort of an entree into what's going on in Mandalore and the clans and all that stuff? Is this going to be a solitary Mando, or is this going to lead us into, full on Mando drama?
Mm-hmm.
Mando on Mando.
I think at the onset of the series, he will be completely solo and on his own. I don't think they would title it The Mandalorian if he didn't find ties back to his culture and his warrior race. But then again, how much of the Mandalorian warrior race is still in existence in this era of the Star Wars timeline?
Right.
From all intents and purposes, we believed Boba Fett to be the lone representative still wearing that armor. Maybe not necessarily Mandalorian, but he was unique in the fact that he was in that era of the Star Wars chronology still wearing Mandalorian armor. I have always felt that he was the lone guy in the galaxy wearing that Mandalorian armor. And I think that the Mandalorian we're going to come across in this series is definitely a lone wolf kind of guy. Yeah. But maybe it'll all come back and he'll find more of his own as the show goes on. I hope not, actually, because the show isn't called Mandalorians. It's called The Mandalorian, meaning he's the lone guy in whatever environment and situation he's in. He's the Mandalorian. The one and only.
And I feel like we've kind of seen that with Sabine.
Yes.
Where she was the Mandalorian, and then that kind of led us to, what we saw. And we also saw quite a bit of Mandalorian drama in the Clone Wars as well. And so, I like that idea. I thought that the title was so cool because to me it sounded like solo, solitary, as you said, the lone wolf. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of hoping that's what we get. Now, in terms of stormtroopers, Waititi does say that it's pretty cool because he says it's every kid's dream to see a stormtrooper. When you're doing scenes with like 50 or 60 of them, it's pretty amazing. I loved it. So he's alluding to the fact that we might see 50, 60 stormtroopers. So some big battles. He talks about the script, says that they're really great. He calls Jon Favreau a genius, so smart and good at what he does. He's a world creator. He's a world builder. So lots of praise. This guy seems very, very excited. And I haven't seen Thor Ragnarok. I'm woefully behind on my Marvel stuff. But Jim, I know you've seen most of them, all of them. Yeah. Does Ragnarok stand out to you as, wow, I could see that guy doing some Star Wars, the visionary behind that?
Well, there's some Led Zeppelin in the soundtrack of Thor Ragnarok. I like that.
All right.
That's very appropriate. It was a good film. A lot of people are they rave about Thor Ragnarok. To me, it kind of rolled along like just any other Marvel film, So I'm probably not the best guy to talk about this, Sakiti and how he's going to be developed. I don't really give a crap about any of that. I just want it to look like Star Wars. I certainly don't want it to look like Thor Ragnarok. Okay? Uh-huh. I don't want this guy coming in to make Star Wars Thor Ragnarok. I want him to come in and make Star Wars. That's all I want. So I'm not really going to be looking at his past output. I'm certainly not looking at, Mandalorian to represent Jon Favreau's past. Like what, swingers in space? No. Who cares about that stuff? He's making a Star Wars movie. So I don't think we should even be thinking about Thor Ragnarok or anything Marvel when it comes to this show. He's going to make it within the realms of Star Wars, like he's saying in this interview. That makes sense to me. I I'd rather see more Star Wars being represented than the vision of a particular director. I want him to stay within the realms of the universe.
Right. So
and not turn it into... I mean, we ran into this problem with Lord and Miller.
Yeah,
where they said they were turning Han Solo into Ace Ventura Pet Detective. See ya, guys. Don't let the door hit you on the ass on the way out. If you don't get Star Wars, you shouldn't be making Star Wars.
Right. I'm sitting here like you, Jim. I have my podcast studio area filled with some of my favorite toys, and I'm looking down right now at the Black Series
action figures. Don't call don't call.
What did I say?
Action figures toys. That's childish. These are action figures.
All right, action figures. Well, I'm looking at my action figure right now.
Yes.
My 6-inch Black Series. This is Bosk. And Bosk is part of the Black Series archive collection. And I just want to tip my hat at Hasbro for doing this, because I know in something where it's very collector driven. Well, hey, look, one of the reasons that we collect, all right, it may not be the primary reason. Probably shouldn't be. You ask Steve Sansweet, the guy with the biggest Star Wars collection on the planet, he will tell you, don't collect to make money. Don't collect because you think it's going to appreciate in value. That shouldn't be your number one driver, because 9 times out of 10, it's worth about what you paid for it. That's usually the way these things go down. But it's a very collector conscious market. And so the idea of re-releasing figures from previous waves to some collectors is just, how dare you? How dare you do this? Because I bought Bosk when he came out 5 years ago. Now you're going to re-release him, and now he's not going to be worth anything. I can't scout people on eBay for it. Well, I want to tip my hat to Hasbro for doing that, because I missed out on Bosk. I missed out on Luke in his X-Wing pilot outfit because I started collecting these figures later. And so I think it's just fantastic that you can go into the stores or you can buy online and you can get these for, $20, $25 rather than paying $100 or $125 on eBay. And there are enough differences that if you're a loose collector, you can tell that this might be the later release. They did make some improvements, but this is such a cool figure. And, what the other thing that was cool about it is, they re-released. I mean, part of Star Wars figure collecting in the vintage days was they re-released these figures sequential, as each film came out. So you had, Luke Skywalker in his shorty robe on a Star Wars back card, and then they released him on an Empire card too.
That's right.
Because they wanted to keep it fresh.
That is true.
So, and people weren't saying, well, that ruins the value of my shorty robe Luke. No one was screaming about that, because you want to keep, you want to engage. What I like about this is this tells people that might have skipped some of these figures to go, gosh, I think I want to get into this. I think I want to get these. So it re-engages some of them. So anyway, if anyone's listening over at Hasbro, I appreciate it. I did have a Boba Fett already, and I had a IG-88, but I was really happy to get that Bosk and that Luke in the X-Wing and kind of complete that phase of the collection. There's a second wave coming out. I think there's a Yoda. There's a Darth Maul. The second wave of archive. And rather than in that traditional box, Jim, they're actually on a blister card, which is also kind of cool.
Yes, yeah. That's true.
I know you're a 4-inch, 3 3/4 inch,
3 3/4 inch for life. That's right.
Yeah. I appreciate that.
I did try to dip my toe into the 6-inch collectible action figure line, but it just can't sustain me. I'm a traditionalist to the very end, and I want my 3 3/4 inch action figures just like it was in 1978. A man knows his Chewbacca. Hey, wait! In other Hasbro Black Series, Star Wars Black Series news, we have this from Entertainment Earth. Get your sweetheart a dozen roses for Valentine's Day. That's right. Star Wars The Black Series Resistance Tech Rose 6-inch action figure case of 12. Now on sale, reduced from $240 to $20. It's going out the door.
Come on. Oh, my God. You're not kidding. I thought this was a bit. I'm looking.
A dozen roses for Valentine's Day. Rose Tico, that is.
Wow.
Roses
it's sold out. It is sold out.
Oh, is
though.
it? Is
yeah,
it? Oh,
yeah.
well, at $20 a case,
wow.
You know that there's a lot of YouTubers that are going to throw down $20 to get a dozen roses. No problem.
Look at that. And, it's actually a pretty darn good figure. This is the this is the Black Series version, the super articulated. I mean, you can get Rose in all kinds of. Look how dynamic she is. With that big right. All these poses you could get her in.
So yeah, I can't believe that they were sending cases of Rose action figures out to stores, thinking they were going to sell a case of Rose. So like one or two per case, a whole case of them. What are they thinking it has, bro?
Oh my God!
I don't even know. I think they're being told what to do by Lucasfilm. Hey, if you look closely at the ad for Entertainment Earth, it says there's a nice picture, 1 dozen roses, and you see all these roses in a bouquet of actual real roses, and it says actual rose flowers not included. But I mean, it makes a nice display. But I do want to point this out to our friends at Entertainment Earth. There are only 11 Rose Ticos in that bouquet. There are not 1 dozen roses. Do the head count. Do the head count right now. Look at their little graphic there.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Well, now I'm only counting 10. What's going on here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I only see 10.
Well, do you see, the 1/3 from the right, you could see one sort of hiding behind her. You see?
Oh, I see it. Okay. Yeah, all right. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. You're right. I only see 11. Well, nonetheless, they sold out.
So the Devotion to Accuracy department is calling out Entertainment Earth for only having 11 roses in their picture of 1 dozen roses. But yeah, it sold out. I mean, how could you resist that price? And like I said, there's tons of YouTubers out there who are going to be beheading them in no time soon.
All right. On that note, here, let's
and it's hilarious, too. I'm sorry. I think it's hilarious.
We got Jeff in Florida here. Jeff.
Hey, Jason. Hey, Jimmy. I never reach out, but just felt like I had to. My name's Jeff. I'm in Florida. And you were reading that readback about Reddit. And the first thing that came to my mind wasn't necessarily the snow globe that you had talked about, but it was more the ending of Lost. Which J.J. Abrams did, and how the ending of that kind of came back full circle, and it was kind of a bizarre ending. And I think that's what that writer was trying to put a spin on in Reddit, was that it was more of a J.J. Abrams type of finish that he's actually known for versus anything else. So I don't know. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that. We'll talk to you later. Thanks for all you do. Bye.
Well, I have to defer to Jimmy Mack because I didn't watch any of Lost. None of it. So, Jim, are there any clues in how J.J. handled the finale of Lost, which, by the way, was praised by the maker himself, George Lucas? And that's when George famously admitted that, despite what many people thought and in reality, what he himself, the legend he created, he didn't have Star Wars figured out from the beginning. He was sort of making it up, in a sense, as he went along. And so he definitely tipped his hat to JJ. Are there any clues in your mind about the way JJ handled the ending of Lost, what we could see show up in episode 9?
Well, I think Billy Mack would probably be a better guy to ask. So next time he's around, we'll have to ask him, because Lost got really twisted and convoluted toward the end, where I really started to lose interest. When it first came on the air, I thought it was just so incredible. It had such open sky ahead of it, and there were so many different directions they could take the show into, and they did. They took it into every different direction they could think to take the show into, and it just got all bogged down in this confusing mess that I could barely even identify by the time it got to its finale. So I certainly hope that...
sounds kind of familiar.
Well, you know what? And here's the interesting thing. They were flying blind in Lost, too. They had no idea where they were going with the story. It wasn't fleshed out with a beginning, a middle, and an end. It had a beginning, and they just then said, well, let's just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. Sound familiar? Ring any bells? That sounds like the J.J. Abrams School of Filmmaking. And it also sounds like a discipline that has been embraced by Lucasfilm and applied to Star Wars. It needed to be thought out a little bit more, and same thing with the TV show Lost. It became very clear about midway through its run that the show was directionless and didn't have a solid foundation as far as where the story was heading.
I mean, nothing is more disheartening when you're watching a mythology unfold, and you're sitting there and you're so engaged and you're guessing and you're speculating, and then to find out that, well, there is no answer, at least not now. The creators don't have an answer. I mean, that it takes some of the fun away because you're trying to guess at a moving target. That's not fun.
And the whole conceptual nature of the show Lost was complex to begin with. And so when you find out that it was pointing in a direction that it didn't know what direction it was pointing in, it was just very random, you do start to lose faith in the storytelling. Where you're like, it starts to feel like they're making this stuff up along as they go along. And so you lose, I think, confidence in where the story is heading.
Yeah, I know. I totally agree. And for those of you that are saying, well, wait a minute, you just said that George Lucas admitted that he did this. And yes, here's the difference. It was one guy. It was one guy as opposed to a committee, as opposed to a group, as opposed to a team.
Or a revolving door.
Or the revolving door. Now, that's not to say that George didn't have collaborators. Of course he did, famously. John Williams, Ralph McQuarrie, but they weren't necessarily influencing the story. Hell, even George's own directors for his subsequent films didn't influence the story. George was the one. He was driving that train himself. So it's not the same to say, okay, I'm going to start telling a story, then I'm going to hand the baton to you, and I'm not going to give you anything other than what you see on the script or what you see on the screen. So now tell me the rest of the story. You know, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. Hey, speaking of George Lucas, beloved Mara Jade, Jim. I mean, there's shrines to this character. Fans of the classic expanded universe just love their Mara Jade. Mm-hmm. And we always had a lot of fun with the fact that we had on pretty good authority. Won't give any sources away, but we had on pretty good authority that George Lucas himself was not a fan of the expanded universe and certainly not a fan of Mara Jade. But this is now showing up again. There was an appearance by J.W. Rinsler, a prolific Star Wars author, the author of that incredible making of series of books chronicling the making of New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. I mean, the big coffee table books, which, by the way, are also incredible digital downloads. You wouldn't think that a big coffee table book like that could be translated as a digital. Well, it does, and they all feature some great multimedia, video clips, audio clips, some rare stuff that are in those. And those are available in the, I believe still available in the iBook store, available for Kindle. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so JW was on another podcast. This was him on the Star Wars Newsnet.com podcast, The Resistance. And I haven't heard these clips, Jim, but what I understand is that JW confirms again that George was not a fan of Mara Jade.
Yeah, JW does say this. And like you said, Jason, this is something we've been hearing for years and years. J.W. Rinsler was in this interview the other day, and he just kind of threw it out there that George Lucas had a really serious hang-up with Mara Jade.
George couldn't stand Mara Jade. He just couldn't stand. He couldn't. They went out and got some sort of person who looked like she'd stepped out of a Cosmopolitan magazine to be the model for and he just thought the whole thing was so not Star Wars and not his vision of Star Wars.
Oh, wow. Gosh. I mean, not his vision of. I mean, there's one thing to say I don't care for the character. There's another thing to hear that George allegedly was saying it's not Star Wars and it's not his vision of Star Wars.
Mm-hmm. Especially when back then Star Wars publishing was being presented to us as, these are things that have been signed off by Lucasfilm and George Lucas, and it's part of the natural canon of Star Wars and everything. And then, meanwhile, we're hearing things behind the scenes. This goes back, 10 years ago, that, people would walk into writing meetings with George Lucas and they would have expanded universe encyclopedias under their arms and things like that. And George would freak out on them and kick them out of what are you doing with that? And these guys are just like, well, it's just reference, It's like, no, it's written by some guy in Germany. Get out of here with that. I mean, he would say, that's what the people say.
Yeah, written by some guy in Germany.
We don't even know what that means. and we don't know what the book was or anything. I don't want people thinking it was the Star Wars encyclopedia written by our good friend Steve Sansweet, Lucasfilm insider Steve Sansweet. Yeah. No, it was just some random whatever. But Rinsler in 2019 is talking about it. But let's go back to 2011 when the Robot Chicken guys, they didn't care. They'll say anything. And on their Robot Chicken Star Wars 3 DVD commentary track, Seth Green and his crew start getting into a discussion about Mara Jade.
For several specials now, and every time we come up with something Mara Jade, it ends up getting cut.
Because it's George's favorite character that he invented himself with his own ideas.
Yeah, George isn't too high on this character.
Yeah.
So right there, confirmation. J.W. Rinsler, he's worked tightly with George Lucas, and so did the Robot Chicken guys. So they certainly have been hearing George talk about it. As a matter of fact, they even did a little bit with George on that same Robot Chicken Star Wars 3 DVD where they were in the writing room, and again, like I said, with Seth Green and his buddies, and they were working on some ideas for the scrapped Star Wars detours, which I think might show up on that Disney Plus streaming platform. But here they are. They're in the writer's room, the meeting room there at the main house at Skywalker Ranch. And, I think the audio just really portrays the event perfectly.
As the creator of Mara Jade,
Wait! I am not the creator of Mara Jade, and I want you to get out of this office right now.
I'm sorry, Zan.
No way.
You brought it on yourself.
I don't want you here.
I'm sorry, George. I didn't think it would go like this.
Out.
Ted, I got your voucher.
Out! There.
I'm sorry about that. I'm so sorry. We'll have him, burned and...
I don't even know who that guy is.
Neither do we.
Which is funny. That's exactly what he said about Jimmy Mack when he met him at the.
He said, "Don't tase me, bro." That was a whole different thing. And he didn't tell me to leave either.
Would you mind holding on to my microphone, please?
Thank you.
Yeah, just so I can see it. Thank you.
It's like a taser.
Oh yeah, I've heard that before.
Nothing away.
I've heard. Zap. Of course, it's an honor to meet you. I would never tase you for sure.
He thought my presence there was delightful.
And I want you to get out of this office right now.
But the Robot
I just love hearing George scream, "Get out!" And he's got this little high-pitched.
Well, you could tell by the acting that George himself clearly directed that scene.
Yes, but what the gem of that is knowing that it's based on this inside joke about George's real hatred of the character Mara Jade.
Well, that's Seth Green wanted to put that on display way back in 2011.
Yeah.
And now Rinsler's going around talking about it as well. But like I said, it's refreshing to hear it from someone else other than our sketchy sources and Seth Green and his pals, the Robot Chicken guys.
Rebel Force Radio.
We've already made that Star Wars reference.
All right, I am looking. I wish you could see the rundown. I am looking at the most ridiculous photo of Mark Hamill. This goes back to 1986. He's got, I don't know how to describe, he's got this pencil thin, you can't even call it a mustache. Yeah. It's a mustache. Right?
Yes.
A mustache. I don't know if it's Errol Flynn or what this is going on, but this is a very, I don't know what's going on with this, but at any rate, he's got sort of the little short haircut. Anyway, what's going on with this? I've been staring at this all night.
All right,
what is this?
You're looking at a picture of Mark Hamill post Return of the Jedi. This is from February 1986. This photo I am sharing with you, and featuring young Mark with that Errol Flynn mustache. Perfect. That's a perfect description of it. Mark was starring in the off-Broadway comedy play Room Service, which is a remake of the old Marx Brothers film, Room Service, right? Mm-hmm. And so Mark was playing in the role that Groucho Marx made famous. It's not necessarily a Groucho Marx mustache, but I'm presuming he has this weird mustache for his role in Room Service.
Boy, this was right up Mark's alley, right? I mean, playing like a Groucho Marx.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He loves that stuff. Yeah. Loves that stuff. So he was on this show, this great show from the 80s called Night Flight. I doubt you remember it, Jason, but I remember it very, very well. It was one of those shows that was capitalizing on the early popularity of music videos in the 80s.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
All right. MTV.
I remember the era. Yeah.
So a lot of kids would get their music videos from shows like Night Flight.
This was a late night show.
It was a late night show, and it featured music videos along with pop culture interviews, wacky videos, all kind of stuff. And it would go all night long.
You know what my memory of Night Flight is? And I'm just getting these flashbacks. It was the first time I saw Corey Hart's Sunglasses at Night video. Do you remember that?
Okay, totally appropriate. Yes.
I wear my sunglasses.
That's probably a very accurate memory you're having right there. So Mark is appearing on this show in 1986. So this is 3 years after Return of the Jedi. Star Wars definitely in his rear view mirror. And Mark, as an acting professional, is dealing with the fallout of being most known as Luke Skywalker and having kind of a hard time with it too at that point of his career. So, he was appearing more on stage than in film because people were not, producers weren't hiring him because he was so well known as Luke Skywalker. And the only real roles he was getting offered were like really bad versions of Luke Skywalker, Mm-hmm. He was being typecasted. And so he found himself on stage more often. He appeared as Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart in Amadeus.
Originated the role.
He also was very well known for his run as John Merrick, the Elephant Man.
Yes, I forgot about that. Yeah, very, very acclaimed Broadway credits.
So they talked to him a little bit about where he's at in his career. And what I love is the journalist conducting the interview for Night Flight, Lisa Robinson. She's not afraid to ask questions about Luke Skywalker. Like I said, Mark was primarily known as Luke Skywalker at this point in his career. So it was hard for him to find other roles. So in our first clip, he talks a little bit about being so well known as that famous character.
You've done quite a bit of theater. You were in Amadeus. You won a Drama Desk nomination. You now doing this Room Service.
Yes.
Do you still feel that people will constantly, for the rest of your life, associate you with Luke Skywalker?
No, I don't. The person who helped me, when I met Mickey Rooney backstage at Sugar Babies, he said, "Do you know how long I was Andy Hardy?" Eventually you just grow out of it. I'm very proud of the Star Wars films. I think they were fun, but they're not my life, I mean, I always make the analogy that it was like high school for me, but I don't want to be forced to go to high school for the rest of my life. And I've had a much easier time breaking the mold in the theater
Yeah, well, that is possible. Yeah, and theater offers that sort of cover for a lot of actors that have been typecast. And he's a theater guy. I mean, he loves to riff and talk about Broadway musicals and theater and all of that. And but what's interesting here, and he still gives that analogy, Jim, about Star Wars being high school. He talks about at the end of at Return of the Jedi when they were done. He's like, yeah, we all kind of went to felt like we were going to our lockers and hanging up our varsity jackets and all of that. He still uses that analogy.
Yeah. And he talks about a conversation he had about his struggles with Mickey Rooney,
the biggest star.
I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall for that conversation.
Now, you actually had conversations with Mickey Rooney yourself.
Oh, yeah. And
many
listen,
times.
And listen, if you think Luke Skywalker's from outer space, that's nothing compared to meeting Mickey Rooney in the flesh. He was insane. He was crazy insane. Incredibly talented, but just like this ball of energy. He was doing
theater in Chicago,
yes,
right?
He was stationed in Chicago. He was starring in the Wizard of Oz play, and he was the wizard. Yep. And so he was here in Chicago for a year or so, and he kept coming to this radio station I was working at, I think just for shits and giggles. It was like Mickey Rooney's here. Holy crap. And he was just this ball of energy. And I mean, despite his age, he was well in his 80s at this time. But what a character. And I could imagine, Mark, he's just sitting there, down in the dumps. And then Mickey rolls up on him. What's wrong, Mark? And then Mark, Mick, they keep giving me these roles as like space captain and Star Warrior and all this. I can't get away from Luke Skywalker. I'm like, listen, you have to keep going forward because you're an actor, and an actor has it in his blood. Mickey was always very dramatic that way when he would talk. Everything was a big flippin' deal. Okay. Like he was always laying this massive knowledge on you. And Mickey Rooney was the type of guy who everyone would meet him, and because of his career and legacy, people would say, Mick, you're a legend. And he'd be like, don't call me that. And you'd be like, oh, you get quiet. It's like, oh, my God, Mickey's going to lay down some stuff on me now. He goes, a legend is a guy looking for a job. So between the legend of Mickey Rooney. What does that even mean? I think, okay, I've had a lot of time to think about this statement because I heard Mickey say it many times to many different people, both on microphone and off. And what I think he was saying was that people who call themselves legends are doing it to promote themselves, to let you know how valuable they would be to your production.
Okay.
So he always felt like those kind of self-proclaimed accolades were bogus. And, maybe he laid some of that knowledge on a young Mark Hamill there as he was backstage one day after a rough day in the room service play. And Mickey rolled up on him. And
a legend is a guy who is looking for a job.
But all right. So let's get back to the night flight interview.
All right.
But so what I enjoy about this is you are getting into Mark Hamill's head a little bit at a time when he was really off of that big Hollywood stage. He was doing off-Broadway stuff at this time in his career. So he talks a little bit about some of the struggles he's faced as far as typecasting goes after he had appeared in the Star Wars films.
I'm having the time of my life. It is so much fun. And I don't really worry too much. I'm always confused by people that say, oh, well, he was typecast. It doesn't make sense to me because typecast implies that you play the same role over and over and over and over. And not only do I think the three roles in George Lucas's films were different because that character grew in each film, but every role I've played has been different. So, I mean, when I read that, I'm kind of confused, but I figure, well, they just don't follow my career.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, he does talk, continues to talk about that, about, he was very aware. And I don't know that he got a ton of direction from George. I think that as we've chronicled here on this show, and anybody who's done their Star Wars history, George is not what you would call a quote-unquote actor's director. And so the actors, sort of had their own were left to their own devices in a lot of ways. And what we know is that Mark often peppered George with questions. What can you tell me about my character? But a lot of that he wasn't given by George, and so really so much of what you see of Luke Skywalker is Mark Hamill, and he did create or as an actor, I think not necessarily create because it was on the page, but I think he really helped cement that arc of the character and was very conscious about the choices he was making in the first film, knowing that there might be others and the choices he was making in the subsequent films. So that's an interesting point that he's making about, all right, they might have all been Luke Skywalker, but they were very different characters from Star Wars to Empire to Jedi. And Jim, looking at the films, I think he's absolutely right. I don't think there is much Luke Skywalker you see in Empire Strikes Back that is the same as the Luke you see in Star Wars.
No, absolutely. There are totally different approaches being taken by Mark at the same character. And it's great because it is significant about the character's evolution and growth. To have him go through those changes. God, I wish Kaz would go through some of these experiences and and kind of grow a little as a character on Star Wars Resistance. So, that's very important to note what Mark had brought to the character of Luke Skywalker. He brought so much to that character, and I think a lot of that character's creation is in Mark Hamill's hands. I think that he took what George had put on the page, a germ of an idea, and really fleshed it out and made it something real and tangible. But Mark also, he did face significant typecasting, and despite his optimistic appraisal of the situation in that last clip that starts off with, I'm having the time of my life, I think Mark was going through a little bit of a personal hell, because here he is coming off of starring, being the top billed actor in the 3, at that time, most popular films of all time, or at least the most popular film series. Definitely something that a young actor would bank his whole career on. After this is over, I'll be able to choose any role that I want. And Mark Hamill didn't get those choices. He got limited choices, and most of them were derivative of his character of Luke Skywalker. So he decided to take the career onto the stage, and I think that was a wise move for him, because that's how the business worked back then. All right. Nowadays, I think actors have more flexibility, and they don't fall into those typecast roles so easily.
Oh, well,
don't you find more flexibility when it comes to certain, I'm talking about good actors. I'm not talking about these run-of-the-mill character actors who just play a certain type of role. I'm talking about an actor like Mark Hamill, who has legitimate flexibility, real acting chops. I think nowadays, if he starred in this current trilogy, I think he would have had greener pastures after it wrapped up. Look at Adam Driver, just recently nominated for an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for his role in BlacKkKlansman. Natalie Portman won an Academy Award for her role in Black Swan after her Star Wars. And Natalie Portman, she's gone on the record by saying Star Wars almost ruined her career.
Yeah.
She found herself falling into that same trap.
Yeah. I think for different reasons, perhaps. I think that, Natalie struggled not just, with the weight of Star Wars, but also with a series of films that weren't as beloved as the originals were. Mark was coming, as you say, off of these huge films that weren't just big box office successes, but wildly, wildly praised and loved movies. The question about typecasting now, I agree. I think that actors have more choice in some ways. I think that opening up, what we see now with television being much more cinematic, or what's the word? Maybe more. Less. I don't want to say less episodic, but certainly more complex.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's mature. I don't really know what the word is, but that has expanded, an actor's ability to stretch, and you see that a lot. You see film actors going to TV, but TV now is Netflix, Amazon Prime, or Hulu, something along those lines. So I think there's more choice for actors perhaps now. Take somebody like, Pierce Brosnan. Okay, Pierce Brosnan did Remington Steele on TV, then went right into James Bond after that. Is Pierce Brosnan typecast? Well, he did that remake of the Steve McQueen film. I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head. But then you see him in Mamma Mia. You see him in some other smaller films here and there. Showed up in Mrs. Doubtfire.
You're talking about a guy who had a pretty solid career before he fell into the role of James Bond. And while that still might be his most well-known role, I think a lot of people have an understanding that he has a more diverse career. With Mark Hamill, his big break was Star Wars. Where was he going to go from there?
That's right.
He probably felt there's no ceiling to where he was going to go after Star Wars. And then the harsh reality of filmmaking in the 80s came down upon him pretty hard. And so he talked about it, we said he had originated the role of Mozart on Broadway. But then when the time came to make a film adaptation of that play, they didn't even give Mark Hamill the opportunity to read for the flippin' role. They didn't even give him the opportunity. So Lisa Robinson asked Mark if he thinks being known as Luke Skywalker actually hurt his career at that point.
Have you lost any roles because of it, do you think?
Oh, well, a couple of times they've told me. Milos Forman said, he was very funny, he said, no, you must not to be playing the Mozart because the people not believing that the Luke Spacewalker is the Mozart. But he was very upfront about it. And I appreciated that rather than getting my hopes up that it was possible that I would be playing the role.
Yeah, I love Tom Hulce in the film. I think, obviously it's multi-Oscar winning movie. But boy, it's hard for me to, when you see Luke, gosh, there I go. When you see Mark's range that he's expressed, particularly as a voice actor, and then you look at what happened, the character that Tom Hulce played as Mozart. I would love to see a Mark Hamill version of that, Mark from that era. And who knows? They do archive and have been archiving Broadway shows for a long time. I would love to see if somebody could, if they would ever release that, perhaps a video recording of Mark live on stage as Mozart. If you're familiar with the movie and you think about a young Mark Hamill playing the role with the kind of range and sort of the crazy laugh and what he's capable of as an actor, you really start to wonder what that might be like.
Oh, he has tremendous range. And quite honestly, when I think about where my headset was in the mid-'80s, I would accept a film with Mark Hamill playing Mozart way before I would Tom Hulce. And Hulce did a great job. He was nominated for an Academy Award. But Tom Hulce, to me, at that time frame, was known purely as Larry Kroger Pinto from Animal House.
Right.
Animal House.
Yeah.
You want to talk about
Milos Forman? Milos Forman has a problem with Luke Spacewalker, but the dude from Animal House I think the problem is Milos Forman never saw Animal House.
That's probably it. Everyone saw Star Wars. Right. And Animal House was a great movie, but I can never look at Mozart, Amadeus. I could never look at that film and not think of Pinto from Animal House. But so let's get to, this has been great. I've really been enjoying listening to this long lost interview with Mark Hamill. It's so rare you find an interview with Mark from this time frame, post Jedi, and the topic of Star Wars, the Star Wars trilogy, does come back up in the conversation, and Hamill reveals that George Lucas told him, laid some information on him about the future of the Star Wars franchise at some dinner party somewhere.
Well, what's next? Do you have any idea what you will be doing after this?
I have 2 offers now. Boy, what happens when it rains, it pours. Aside from this moving to Broadway, there's a very serious film I might do about a person on death row. And then there's something else that I probably even shouldn't talk about because I don't know if it's worked out, and I'm superstitious. I figure if I mention it, I won't get it.
But no more space movies.
Not for me. As far as I know, if they go on and do more, it'll be all our characters are finished.
Well, this was the end of the trilogy, no? But you think they might go on and do more?
Well, he said something about doing 3 that precede this trilogy and 3 that follow this trilogy. But see, I never know. I found out they were doing a Saturday morning cartoon show. I read it in the newspaper. My son saw an ad for...
Will there be a character based on you in it?
In the cartoon show? Yeah. I don't think there is. I've taped it for my kid, although he prefers Muppet Babies. Opposite on CBS. Oh, but see, I don't get some sort of... I don't get a newsletter. Dear Mark, here's what we're doing. My son saw an ad for the Ewok movie on TV. He said, Dad, I saw Ewoks. It's going to be on television. I said, oh, great. My favorite one was they have Ewoks on Ice, the ice show. But no, I've seen George. I went to his 4th of July party, picnic. But we don't talk about the movies. We say, hi, how are you? How's Amanda?
That's his daughter.
Yeah. Got another little gray hair in your beard, George. We kid him. I give him Dutch rubs, and then I go home.
There will be more than you won't be.
No. I hope so. Well, I don't know. Maybe I will be in one, but I think I should play a person that has 6 eyes. I mean, I don't want to play Luke again. Unless they get me a girlfriend. You know what it reminded me of? It was like the good news, bad news jokes. Because when we finally read the script for Jedi, they said, the good news is, yes, we have found an eligible female in the galaxy. The bad news is, she's your sister.
Well, I'm not going to give you Mara Jade, let me tell you.
Well, there was a lot in that. I mean, there was a lot in that. Yeah. I mean, this, look, this Mark Hamill, that had no desire to go back and play Luke Skywalker, this lasted for a good while. I mean, the Mark that comes out and gives the big "I love you" to the fans didn't exist until. What would you say? 2010, 2011?
I don't know. Carrie Fisher says that she went to a play of his and she was looking at the program or the playbill or whatever it is, and she was reading Mark's bio. And she said, why is Star Wars all the way at the bottom buried in your bio? It's all the way at the bottom. You have all this other stuff here. Star Wars, he's like, well, I don't want to be known for Luke Skywalker forever. And she's like slapped him in the face and said, what are you, crazy? You have to embrace this stuff.
Yes.
She said, you don't realize what a gift that was that you got to be able to play a character like that and own it the way you do. So own it, damn it. Own it. And that's when I think Mark started to turn around. But you're right. He didn't start showing up at conventions and stuff as a guest or a panelist or someone who's going to host his own thing. That didn't start happening until, I want to say, Star Wars Celebration Europe.
Yeah.
The very first one, which I believe was around 2008 or so. So that was probably the first time he started showing up. And then I saw him in Japan in 2008. So he was definitely at that convention. And you could tell he wasn't exactly, I wouldn't say he was a fish out of water, but he was, still a little.
He wasn't convinced.
Maybe keeping everything a little bit at arm's length at that time. We didn't see him really fully embrace the convention circuit until it was announced that he was going to be back in Star Wars, or around that time. Around that time. So, timing was perfect.
Yes, and I don't say any of this to insinuate that he's not sincere in his love of the fans. I don't have any doubt that he is a hugely grateful to the fans, really legit loves spending time with the fans, talking to the fans. Not at all. But I think it took him some time, and maybe it was that, Jim, that's a great story. I remember hearing that story about Carrie Fisher coming to his dressing room and giving him a hard time about that. Embrace it, own it. You're Luke Skywalker. I'm Princess Leia. That's a champagne problem to have. But no, thanks for pulling that. That was really, really fun. I also like the Muppet Babies clip, which, by the way, had its own share of Star Wars references back in the 80s.
This is true. Babies. Yeah, they did a whole episode, didn't they?
Yeah, they
Star
did.
Wars episode. Long before Family Guy, you had the Muppets. Now, let me ask you this question, because I was not a little kid in the 80s. I was a teenager in high school driving cars and getting in all kind of trouble. I wasn't staying around the house watching Ewoks or Muppet Babies on Saturday. I wasn't watching anything on Saturday morning except probably the toilet bowl on some mornings. But did you have to make that choice? I know you love the Muppet Babies. I've never really heard you talk much about the Droids Ewoks cartoons.
Yeah.
Did you watch those in the 80s? Do you have any memory of that?
I do. I have very vivid memories of watching them, and also not really caring for them very much, and being really disappointed. Really disappointed. I think that's where some of my prejudice is when it comes to Star Wars that doesn't have what I consider principal primary characters in it, because it's like, oh my God, it's another droids or another Ewoks. So I was definitely, I was with, I'm assuming he might be talking about Nathan, because we're about this, I think we're pretty close to the same age, Nathan Hamill, his son. I was with Nathan. I was a Muppet Babies, for sure. And I didn't have, we had VCR at the time, but I wasn't, taping it. I remember when it was the Droids and Ewoks hour, and then Droids kind of went away, I think, after one season or maybe 2 seasons. And, but I did watch for a few weeks, thinking, I was so naive. There was no internet. There's not, and I was too young to be reading like Starlog or anything like that. I sat there every week waiting for them to run into Han and Chewie and Leia and Luke. I had no idea. There was nobody to explain what timeline this takes place in. And I was savvy enough to think that if this took place before, where was this Antilles guy? I remember thinking that. Like, what? Yeah, what's going on? And then Ewoks was just like, it was like Snorks or Smurfs, but just with Ewoks. And I saw that right away. But Muppet Babies.
So even as a little kid, you could take note of the lack of quality.
Absolutely.
They're fun to look back at now. You could find a lot of them on YouTube. But there is something like very fundamentally off about it when compared to what existed in the Star Wars catalog up to that point. Now, you hear a lot about Resistance being a show for kids. Droids and Ewoks was clearly for kids. There was no middle area there.
No, there wasn't at all. And we have, if you go back, maybe, Jim, this is one you could pull out at some point. It was one of the very, very rare interviews that I did solo because you were sick. And I interviewed Paul Dini, who's one of my favorites, prolific writer, creator of the Harley Quinn character for Batman the Animated Series. But he started out, one of his first gigs was writing for I believe Ewoks and Droids cartoons.
Yeah, that's right.
And he talked about coming into it as a Star Wars fan and. Oh yeah, all these characters. Well, no, you're not going to be writing for Luke Skywalker. You're not going to be writing for Han Solo or Chewbacca or anything. It was all these, new characters, and I was like, oh, okay, well, that's That's interesting.
The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Oh, is that not true? Is that not true? All right, we got one last one here. Here's a Star Wars and pop culture reference. The Jerry Garcia?
Right.
What's this about?
All right, of course. I love Star Wars. And I also love the Grateful Dead. I would classify myself as a Deadhead. I was really into the band a lot in the 80s and 90s. They've seen sort of a resurgence over the last few years, and a lot more people are listening to the Grateful Dead. Good old Grateful Dead, American music. And I've become a big fan of a show on Sirius XM hosted by Steve Parrish, who was Jerry Garcia, the lead guitarist for the Grateful Dead. He was Jerry Garcia's roadie and manager and stage manager, and he's a keeper of the flame when it comes to telling great Jerry Garcia stories. So he hosts a show every week on Sirius XM called The Big Steve Hour, not to be confused with Big Honkin' Steve Glosson. This is Big Steve Parrish, and he's a straight shooting guy. I really enjoy listening to his stories. And last week on the Big Steve Show, someone finally asked the question that I've been wondering for the longest time. Was Jerry Garcia a Star Wars fan? And I know Jerry was a big fan of movies, and so Steve fielded this question from the caller, and it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, go ahead.
About Jerry, what did he think about Star Wars?
He liked it. He liked Star Wars. He liked that kind of stuff, but he wasn't nuts about it in any way. You know, we used to work with George Lucas a lot, and we would record up at Lucas Valley because we used to own a piece of land. We called it Dead Patch. We were going to build our own commune on Lucas Valley Road, which is not named after George Lucas. It's Old Man Lucas way before that. The place that George Lucas bought was called the Bulltail Ranch, and we owned a piece there that we had to sell in 1970 because we ran out of money, and we wanted to build this whole thing. So anyway, we would go up and record at George Lucas's place. We got to know him really well. And Jerry was very respectful of his, expertise. And, of course, American Graffiti, we were part of that. It was filmed all in this area. And so we knew him from all that stuff. And George Lucas is a great guy. He really is. Now he has his whole thing at the Presidio and all this thing. But Jerry likes Star Wars. He loves science fiction. But movies like, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, that would affect him even more. We went to see that a couple of times. Jerry loved all movies, and he liked the first Star Wars. I went to see it with him, C-3PO and all those guys were new. They were brand new form of movies. But he didn't go overboard about it. We liked
he wasn't obsessed.
Right, he wasn't obsessed with Star Wars.
Jerry and the guys are coming over. Record. What, Jim, did you know this at all, that there was a relationship between George Lucas and Jerry Garcia? They on the same land? They were neighbors practically?
Well, yeah, actually, I've learned this over the past few years. Obviously, two of the biggest pop culture properties to ever come out of Northern California is the Grateful Dead and Star Wars. I mean, huge, massively merchandised, huge fan bases, loyal fan bases. And I knew that their paths had crossed. Now, I started getting into the Grateful Dead over the past few years, and a lot of my trips to San Francisco to go to places like Skywalker Ranch, Lucasfilm, and Rancho Obi-Wan, I mean, making those regular trips out there has exposed me more and more to the music out there. And so I've been able to see members of the Grateful Dead in the Bay Area perform with of course, Stu from Rancho Obi-Wan. He's always been a good guy to sort of show me around the Bay Area music scene. But George Lucas, seriously, George Lucas and the Grateful Dead, they definitely would cross paths regularly. The Dead did record up in Skywalker Ranch. Mickey Hart, Grateful Dead drummer, would record up in Skywalker Ranch. And there's a great video online of George Lucas giving Mickey a tour of one of the sound stages that they have there in the tech building at Skywalker Ranch. And, this big giant room where they record anything from huge symphonies to rock bands like Metallica and the Grateful Dead. So that happens at Skywalker Ranch, and George pokes his head in to see what's going on. Hey, something smells funny in here. Grateful Dead must be here. So that, and then they also had a mutual bond over the teachings of Joseph Campbell. Oh. And that sort of thing. Yeah, the Grateful Dead were very much in touch with all of that stuff. And so that's something that Jerry and George Lucas would actually get together and discuss, and they would talk about things. Another connection with the Grateful Dead, this is something I just learned with a documentary that came out about the band last summer called The Long Strange Trip. Former Dead recording engineer Dennis the Wizard Leonard, who's famous for recording Europe 72 for the Grateful Dead, has been working on film sound at Skywalker Ranch for years now at Skywalker Sound. And so, there's a guy who's recorded Grateful Dead albums actually working in sound on major motion pictures that you've probably seen, not Star Wars films. I went and looked at his IMDb, and he didn't work on Star Wars. But, yeah, Dennis Leonard, the Wizard, he is there at Skywalker Ranch as well. So there's many connections. Jerry Garcia had a house on Lucas Valley Road right next to Skywalker Ranch. And you heard, Steve Parrish mention Lucas Valley Road. George Lucas has nothing to do with the name of that road.
Total coincidence.
It's a total coincidence, but it's great. You go to Skywalker Ranch, you get off the 101 at Lucas Valley Road.
Right.
And
I'm sure George saw it as a sign. Yeah, this is the place.
Well, here we go. Yeah. Seems like home to me. And then, he probably then told everyone that he owns the road, and but no, it's cool. It's so there's a lot of Grateful Dead Star Wars mashups too, merchandise, a lot of cool pins. I've actually started collecting them.
Nice.
And then here in my studio, Jason, you sent me a Funko Pop of Jerry Garcia, and so he's standing right next to my customized Zero the Hutt action figure. What a pair! That's a party right there. That's a party right there.
Oh man.
I have to take a picture of that. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, more connections between the Grateful Dead and George Lucas than you would presume, for sure.
You love Star Wars.
Rebel Force Radio.